of today's webinar is Physics Faculty Positions in the Colleges. I'm Crystal Bailey, and I'll be your host today for today's broadcast. Thank you all so much for joining us. APS webinars are brought to you as a service of the American Physical Society, connecting you with the expertise of individuals who can offer insight into physics careers, educational programs, and professional development for students, working physicists, and educators. Today's presentation features Professor Neal Abraham and will be moderated by Dr. Ted Hodap. Professor Abraham will discuss rewarding opportunities for teaching, research, and service at predominantly undergraduate colleges. After Professor Abraham finishes the presentation, the remainder of the program belongs to you for our question and answer session. Because of the number of people attending this webinar, we are only accepting text questions. So if you would like to ask a question, please type it into the questions panel located on the right side of your screen. I also want to remind our listeners that you can continue to submit questions into the questions panel throughout the webinar, and we will try to answer all of your questions at the end. We will do our best to cover all of the questions that you submit, but we do want to apologize if we're unable to cover everything. Finally, a link to the recording of today's presentation will be emailed to you after today's event. We encourage you to complete the survey upon exiting so that APS webinars can improve its ability to provide you with these valuable services. So with that, let's get started.
All right.
Moderating the discussion today will be Ted Hodap, Director of Education and Diversity at the American Physical Society. Ted is also Principal Investigator of a large NSF and APS-funded national effort, the Physics Teacher Education Coalition, which seeks to improve the quality and quantity of physics and physical science K-12 teachers. Before coming to APS, Dr. Hodap served as Program Director in the National Science Foundation's Division of Undergraduate Education and was also Professor and Chair of the Hamline University Physics Department in St. Paul, Minnesota. And with that, I'll hand things over to you, Ted.
Thanks, Crystal. All right, today we've got Dr. Neal Abraham. I've known Neal for a number of years through the Council on Undergraduate Research. He's going to talk to us today about physics faculty positions at small colleges. We used to call these PUIs, or primary undergraduate institutions. That's a little bit of a jargon term. Neal's a 1972 graduate and a trustee of Dickinson College and has taught physics at 5 different colleges in his 36 years as a faculty member. He's also been the department chair, vice president for academic affairs, and has held various leadership positions at undergraduate research programs. So with that, and he's currently the president of 5 Colleges Incorporated in the New England area. So, Neal, you ready to go?
I'm ready. Crystal, give me the panel so I can launch my webpage.
Okay.
Okay, show my screen 1, main monitor. How's that? Did I show it clean?
No, that's your mail.
You're seeing my mail. All right, let me uncover the publish page. How's that? There we go. See the first slide?
Good.
Well, I'm pleased to join you today to talk about exciting opportunities of teaching physics in the colleges. There will be some jargon terms as we go along, and I'll want to help you with that. Ted introduced one, which is that the colleges are often referred to as predominantly undergraduate institutions. Another way to refer to them is that they are programs generally without graduate students, but colleges are not always called colleges. Some are called universities, and some colleges, by their names, are mini universities, such as Bryn Mawr College, where I taught for 18 years, which had a graduate program, PhD program, in fact. But the focus here is on those colleges where you'll have an opportunity to teach physics and to do your scholarship and to be a full-time faculty member. They range from private liberal arts colleges and public liberal arts colleges. Some are larger than others, perhaps as many as 2,500 or 3,000 students. Some are as small as 700 or 800 students. Some have large endowments and much higher salaries and budgets than others. But there's a general approach here that we'll try to talk about as we go along. And perhaps the greatest distinction, other than not having graduate students, is that those who have majors have a small number of faculty members, often in the range of 3 to 6 or 7, who teach the full undergraduate physics curriculum and offer courses for non-majors, pre-meds, and other students who are looking to fulfill their science requirements, such as they may exist, as well as servicing the 10 or 12 different courses that are needed for those who are looking to finish physics majors. So one of the things that I'd like us to do, I'll take you through, is to look at how institutions advertise themselves and then to think about the different stages of getting these jobs. How the institutions advertise themselves is in part a way to learn the different aspects of a job at these kinds of institutions. The best resource for all of us as you're looking for job opportunities is to go to the APS website. And there in the jobs section or the careers section, and here I've listed some of the links which you could click through from one page to the next if you start at the APS homepage, which is there at the top, or go to the bottom. That takes you right to the job opportunities where you can fill in the little search box and either specify all jobs in physics, or you can specify geographical limitations or subfield limitations to see what the opportunities are. It's a little harder to search by school, but you will recognize them in various ways, often because in the name of the institution you'll find college. How do some of these institutions advertise themselves? Well, I picked up a couple of ads from the fall listings of positions. So this is from fall 2010. Smith College, for example, Lewis and Clark College, and we'll come then to Denison University, which is an undergraduate liberal arts college. These were three that came to mind. I picked them because of the type and difference of the types of descriptions that they're offering in the Physics Today ads. Often the APS online listing is more detailed because it's cheaper for those who are advertising, and you may well find that the listing on the institution's HR site, Human Resources website for job opportunities, or on the Dean or the Physics Department website will be even more detailed. But let's look first at the Smith ad. You'll see the usual bow towards this is an entry-level position, assistant professorship. They'll usually say tenure track if tenure is an option, 6 years or so after you're hired, but there will be others that may list it as a term, a 2-year or a 3-year term position. You'll generally see an interest in candidates having completed their PhDs. Some will ask for postdoctoral experience. Some will specify a subfield. Others will emphasize linkages to research that involves undergraduates in the research. You want to watch these because these are codes for the kinds of people they're looking for. Some will emphasize experimental, some will say field open. Smith and Lewis and Clark offer some of those possibilities. Denison clearly paid more. They had a longer ad in Physics Today, and they say more. They want to promote their funds for research, their support for professional development, and for family leaves. So because they spend more, to say more doesn't necessarily mean they have more. It means that they're sensitive to what might be advertised and what might be an impediment to your deciding to apply to their positions. You will see on some, not all, that they will go on to say what you should submit: a vita, transcripts, description of your teaching interests, a proposed research plan that will include a way of involving undergraduates. These are cues that you should address these in your organization of the CV and in your letter and other statements that you send. So all of these ads indicate that there will be teaching. That's not surprising. That's what faculty jobs really are much of the time. Many of the colleges, not all, but many, and that's something to remember because it's often de-emphasized. Many of the colleges, in fact, emphasize research by faculty members, research with students, and so there will be opportunities and support for research They vary by institution, so that bears investigation. And they will expect you to do service. These are institutions that engage their faculty members deeply in the lives of their students and in the life of the institution. So whether it's advising students or serving on committees at the departmental or institutional level, this is a job that has these three features: teaching, research, and service. A few words about each of those. Teaching. You'll be teaching physics majors and non-majors. You may be teaching interdisciplinary courses. You may have small classes, particularly at the upper level. Most colleges have numbers of majors ranging from 3 to 10 per year, so the classes tend to be small except for the intro. And the intros will have lots of other service purposes. Often the colleges are not big enough to have separate tracks for pre-meds or non-majors. So you'll have mixed populations at the introductory level, maybe algebra-based or calculus-based for the initial teaching. And colleges tend to emphasize laboratory instruction. You can expect not just laboratories with the introductory course, but with the advanced courses, and an expectation that faculty members will share in that. Even if you're a self-described theorist, be prepared to teach laboratories at several different levels if you want to appeal to a college department that has these responsibilities. And the teaching loads will vary depending on the institutional commitment to research and other things. So you might expect to be teaching anywhere from 2 to 4 courses per semester, and labs may be part of or be counted separately as courses depending on the institutional commitment to how much time they want you to have to do things other than teaching. But the teaching will be fun, both because it's interdisciplinary and because you will be teaching not just in your specialty, but in broader areas of physics. Most generally, perhaps most of any of the disciplines in the colleges, be it philosophy or chemistry, as a comparison, you will find that physics faculty members seem to be prepared to teach just about every course in the physics undergraduate curriculum. With regard to research, many colleges, many institutions without graduate students nonetheless expect their faculty members to do research and to involve undergraduates. Occasionally, your research funding from outside sources may be sufficient to support postdocs, and the institutional funding may be anywhere from a few tens of thousands to over 100,000, depending on your needs. If you need $1 million to get your lab started, a college won't be the right place for you. But if you have interesting and exciting research that could get started and be sustained in the early years for $30, $40, up to $100,000, take a serious look at the colleges. They'll have dedicated lab space for you, space for you to work with students, and this kind of funding to help kickstart the fundraising that you will do to support your research. It'll be important to pick a kind of research and topics that can be done at colleges in the space and the timetable that will be available for you. There are even some targeted funding sources that are more available to you as a faculty member at a college than they would be to those at Research One institutions. Targeted programs such as the NSF RUI program, the REU, which is specifically for student stipends, and funding from private sources such as Research Corporation, which may provide grants in the $30,000 to $40,000 range for new faculty members doing research in physics at the colleges. And then there's service, which I mentioned. It will begin with advising majors and non-majors, indeed advising students about completing the full range of their liberal arts graduation requirements, and evolving into departmental leadership roles, departmental committees, campus committees. And remember, part of your service will be helping to keep the laboratory-rich nature of a physics department running, because the college is unlikely to have full-time technicians to keep that going. Maybe one, maybe two, maybe none. And so the physicists themselves become their own technicians for some of the laboratory maintenance. Why do I find these jobs exciting? Well, first of all, because I have been excited as a faculty member at colleges in teaching the full range of physics courses, excited students who I get to teach at more than one level in the curriculum, and working with colleagues. You have a great deal of independence. You get to work closely with student collaborators. You get a chance to innovate both in your teaching and in your research, and you have the full breadth and energizing renewal that comes from working with colleges across the curriculum in a liberal education. Understanding what you should do to prepare for and to apply for such a position requires you to understand what the expectations are. You'll be expected to be a very effective teacher. Effective not just in the delivery, in fact, that's probably the bad paradigm to start with, but effective in engendering student learning. And that means very engaged teaching with lots of student feedback and interaction in class and outside of class. You'll be expected to be effective in laboratory instruction, that you will engage students in research projects, that you will have a productive research program, that you will seek external support and other forms of external validation through publication and presentation, that you will be committed to and effective at advising students, and that you will contribute to the governance and operations life of the department and the college. What will they be looking for? A PhD for sure. If you haven't finished your PhD, they'll worry that you can't get your courses taught and your research started and finish your PhD. So look for timing. Look to be sure that you'll be finished your PhD before you arrive. Some campuses will be looking for that PhD completed, and therefore perhaps that you're in a postdoctoral or temporary teaching position. But I would say in physics it's still not absolutely common that you will do a postdoc before you get one of these positions. I think the statistics are a little bit higher for international students who take postdocs a little more commonly than domestic PhD earners, but it's somewhere in the 40 to 60%, though given the tight job market, a few more are taking postdocs than had been the case in earlier years. There will be interest in seeing that you are an effective teacher, and effective more than just being a TA. If you have evidence that you've taught classes, organized classes, graded classes, done the whole gambit of work that a faculty member does, that will serve you well. You need to take time with your teaching statement to say what you're interested about in teaching, that you're sensitive to the pedagogical methods that are effective for science learners, for majors and non-majors. Show an interest in teaching because that will make them more interested in you. That you have a sustainable and projected to be productive research plan that will involve undergraduates at their campus. And that you have relevant letters of recommendation. I'll give this advice again later, but please think about whether the standard letter that you might have asked someone recommending you to write for a job at a research university with a full focus on your research is going to help you as much at a college as someone who can comment both on your teaching and your research. But perhaps it's not the same person. You may need different people to comment on those two topics. How might you prepare? As I said, get teaching experience beyond work as a TA. Learn about methods of science pedagogy and apply them. Show that you've been thinking about this as its own specialty, not just your research specialty, but that teaching is a specialty for you as well. Develop a philosophy of teaching. Be able to say, what is your approach to helping students learn science and learn physics in particular? Select your research program, perhaps adapting things from your PhD or postdoc. Think about what you can sustain, what you can maintain with big investment in the summer and modest investment during the academic year. Perhaps even visit some colleges, get to know what they are like, see their physical facilities, talk with their students and their faculty members, and adjust your language so that it fits with the kinds of ways that physics faculty members and students at colleges talk about the physics program. I showed you some job ads a little bit earlier. Do study the job ads carefully. Look at the differences or the elaborations in the job ad as you look at longer and longer versions of ads for the same description, from Physics Today, as I said, probably shortest, to what's listed on the campus website, departmental or dean's websites that describe positions in more detail. Don't recycle your application letter to the University of Michigan. Think about this institution as caring it fully about teaching, scholarship, and service, and you want a letter that shows you're interested in those. Perhaps look for courses that are offered now that you're interested in teaching, or some opportunities that you would like to offer. And thereby learn the campus terminology, see how they refer to the teaching of different types in the department. And think carefully before you ask for an R1 letter. On the other hand, I have read far too many letters from those who clearly had written letters for some of their students to go to the University of Michigan or the University of Wisconsin, who then in writing to DePaul University said, oh, I recommended him for a top place, or she is really good, but you know, she wants to teach, and so I guess she's pretty good for you too. Get someone who's enthusiastic about recommending you to a college, rather than someone who seems almost to apologize for the application. Make your letter of application thoughtful. Have separate statements of teaching philosophy and interests, a separate one on your research. And where the opportunities permit, comment if you've done work on ensuring or helping to contribute to access through physics to physics careers and professional science careers for members of underrepresented groups. Remember that women are still woefully underrepresented in physics. If you've worked with women students to advance their careers, or with students of color, those are things to add to your story. You may have a chance to interview at conferences, but unlike some academic fields, physics doesn't position a major conference to which all physicists go at an appropriate time in the hiring cycle. So if you find an opportunity through a job fair to interview with some faculty members from places offering jobs, think about how you can use the short time of such interviews to your best advantage. Have short statements of your interests. Listen carefully to questions and answer briefly. Wait for guidance before you elaborate. If you use up 20 minutes of an interview answering the first question, they'll begin to wonder whether they'll ever have a chance to ask you other questions. So have your elaborations ready, but hold back and answer succinctly to the questions as they offer them. As the winnowing process continues, you may be invited to interview on campus. There, it's important to understand your audience. At a college, rather somewhat unlike a research institution, at a college you'll be asked to interview with physics faculty colleagues, probably with other faculty members, with students, and with academic administrators, the deans. Even at some colleges, you'll be asked to interview with the president. Be prepared for those different audiences. If you go to an R1 institution, you might spend most of your time, indeed all of your time, interviewing with the research subgroup and then perhaps giving a public lecture for the department. But at a college, it's unlikely that you will have one, and it may be none, of other specialists in your subfield. So you have to broaden the way you present your topic. So be prepared for questions, and in particular, what will non-specialists ask of you, and what can you say to them about your interest in teaching and about your interest in general science education? When you talk about your research, be sure and make it interesting. Make it clear what the intellectual excitement is and why students who might work for you would find this exciting. The emphasis often is just on presenting results the way you would at a conference, and that often obscures what's interesting and exciting. So keep that in mind. It's probably different from a straight research PowerPoint that you would give at a research university or at a conference. Be interested in the courses you might teach and in the labs you might teach. Be interested in helping students to see their career paths. And while you're there, explore the research facilities, the support for getting grants, the support for students to work with you in the summer, and the startup funding. But negotiating happens after you get the offer. Don't start negotiating while you're in the interview phase. The interview phase is when you're making yourself attractive and you're showing interest. Wait for the offer. When you have the offer, then you begin to discuss in detail the equipment and supplies needs, the support for students, the needs you have for the courses you're being asked to teach. Salary may or may not be negotiable, so if you ask and say, no, sorry, that's the starting salary, that may be the right answer, but other things may be negotiable. So have your list and ask about these things. I think generally it's unlikely that a college will lowball you, hoping that you'll take the job for the cheap. They're worried about standards. They're worried about attracting you, and they're worried about being fair to other faculty members who are already in the job a few years ahead of you. And it would be at this point that you might ask for help in finding positions for a partner or spouse who would like to find a job at the institution or at neighboring institutions. There are lots of resources after you get the job. If you've taken it, there are resources, a new faculty workshop offered by the professional societies, APS, AAPT, and AAS. There is a whole website of resources for undergraduate physics faculty members. It's listed here. You find a quick link from the APS homepage. You'll be planning your courses, planning to get your research going, and thinking about how to use students from the start. Some of the most exciting times for involving students in your work will be when they are working with you in getting your research going. Other resources include the Council on Undergraduate Research, long a sponsor of faculty members who are getting research started at colleges and involving students in research with them at colleges. The Council on Undergraduate Research has published a series of how-to booklets that you can find on their website, from how to get started to how to get a job and how to develop more elaborate research programs. There's also on their website a white paper about jobs in the colleges that a colleague and I wrote some years ago, helping to differentiate colleges from the universities as places where you might find jobs. There's a great handbook published about a decade ago by the National Research Council on science teaching, moving away from the standard lecture format to other more engaged formats of teaching and learning. There's a great National Research Council report on how people learned from the National Academies Press. It compiles the research from cognitive science and other fields that show the evidence, the scientific evidence of how learning takes place, so that you, and in your conversations with colleagues, you can be best informed about the ways that students process information and construct knowledge. And then with regard to liberal arts colleges, there's a great book here that is a compilation of essays about what makes liberal arts colleges special, and I commend that to you. Well, that completes my presentation. I run through the phases of looking for, considering, and getting a job, and then getting started at a college with a job in physics. We now turn to welcoming your questions, and I would be happy to take a range of questions. I hope we have plenty of time for those questions that you have saved up.
Thanks very much, Neal. That was great. And so we have a bunch of questions already queued up, and I would invite people to ask other questions. Now is a good time to do that. So we'll start with the first question here. There's questions on research, there's questions on teaching, and the like. So here's one. So this person asks, well, I've had a PhD and now in a postdoc, but I've never had a chance to teach a full-length class. So how do I get a strong teaching statement?
Well, on the one hand, you can say what you would like to do. But I think that will be less persuasive than things that you might say more of. One would be sit in on classes. Ask a faculty colleague if you could watch classes, if you could discuss with them their strategies for teaching, see if you could find opportunities to guest present a topic in a class and spend some time in the class before and after to brief with the faculty members and debrief about how your teaching went. I think if you're just saying, I'd love to do it, but I haven't done it yet, you'll be at a disadvantage relative to those who have done more. So seek out opportunities. At the extreme, you might offer to teach a class, but I think even if you haven't taught the class for the whole semester, if you've helped to teach part of a class and have spent time observing classes and thinking about how they're taught, that will give you a leg up over just saying, I'm interested.
Okay. Yeah, I know I taught folk dancing before, and that helped me get my first job. So it was something about that. Also taught math at a general college beforehand. So you might try some of those things if you get a chance in your own university when you're getting your PhD. Here's another question. What is productive research measured? Is this 3 papers per year? What would be the kind of expectation that you'd expect at a PUI?
That would vary very much by the institution, but I think you would be able to see on the one hand by looking at what the younger faculty members in the science departments have on their websites about what they've done, and you would find it quickly by talking with senior colleagues in physics and the dean. I think they will want certainly refereed publications by the time of the tenure review. Is that 2 by then, or is it 4 or 6? I don't think it would be as many as 18 if you're being reviewed in your 6th year, but more than 1 that's been reviewed and published, I think, and you'd have to see whether they expect those publications to be appearing by the time of what is a pretty standard review in the 3rd year as a kind of preview feedback to you. So some regular stream of presentations and publications, recognizing that it might take you a couple of years to get your new laboratory productive. So continuation of publications from prior work, but then publications from work done at the institution where you're employed, I think should be on the books by the time of tenure, 2, 3, 4, or 5, depending on the place.
What do you think about, just kind of a related question, what do you think about getting external funding? What kind of requirements would you suggest might be reasonable for that?
Most colleges would expect you to apply and would understand that the major competition for NSF funding, the major basic research grants, will be tough. But Research Corporation is probably an application you should have in your 1st year, and if you're not funded on the 1st round, read the reviews carefully, revise and resubmit. You should get funded for Research Corporation or for an RUI grant as you begin to show promise from your early productivity with your startup money. But I think those that care about research and expect the research productivity will not be too impressed if your first grant proposal goes out the door in your 5th year rather than in your 2nd year.
Right. I always used to tell new faculty who came in my department that they should have the draft in my hands when they walked in the door on the first day. As
a dean, I offered incentives to help faculty members. I said, I'll make more of your startup money available to you as soon as you've submitted your first grant proposal.
Very nice. All right, let's move on to another question here. It says, so can you give an example of what constitutes good evidence for effective teaching? Do you mean student evaluations, letter of recommendations, or something like this?
Often those who have taught and have student evaluations submit them. It's a little hard to know whether you've submitted all of them. So I think it can be useful to submit some. Please don't submit 100 different student evaluation forms. You know, the weight of the file will persuade people that you have some organizational difficulties. But some student comments that show evidence, not just that they checked a box that gave you a high score, but it's more interesting to see student comments that say you taught in a way that was interesting. You inspired them. You encouraged them. I think also to show evidence of how you planned the courses. So what strategies did you take to help students that were having difficulties? And so some commentary about your teaching, comment on who learned, who struggled, how you helped those who struggled, and evidence might be from faculty colleagues who observed you, students who you might ask to write about it, or the course evaluations if they have comments. And I'd even say be selective and show the ones where students can indicate the kinds of things you did that help them learn.
I would also kind of add that if you pay attention to kind of the pedagogical literature or know something about the current kind of stuff, there's things published in a variety of circles and are at least knowledgeable about that, that will help. So you might want to consider joining the American Association of Physics Teachers or looking at some of those publications that are coming out in that. But you don't want to spend all your time on that for sure. Here's another question. How do you, quote, visit some colleges to give research talks, unquote, without being invited as a part of the interview process? You had a slide on this, but it didn't fully explain how you do that.
You're right. Well, I think it's the wrong time to say, I see you have a job advertised, could I come give you a talk? So the visits, I think, are things you do the year before or the semester before. Before you apply for jobs, look around. Offer to the neighboring colleges that you've got some new results and you'd be happy to come give a talk at their physics colloquium seminar. Some campuses organize this formally as much as 6 months in advance. Others are happy to have visitors come and talk. If you can offer something interesting, then I think that makes life for a hectic physics organizer of the physics colloquium that much easier. So write and introduce yourself and say, I've got some new results, I've presented at a conference, or I'd be willing to give a talk. Could I come for a half day, be happy to give a talk or not? I'd just like to visit, see what your facilities are like. What is it like to teach in a physics department in a college? Invite yourself, introduce yourself. You might, at a professional meeting, look for folks in colleges, strike up a conversation, and see if you could come for a visit. But if you're within driving distance, then it's cheap time-wise and money-wise for you and your host. And that's probably the best way to get started.
Great. So a couple of questions on the topic of what is the thing that might torpedo or ruin your application? Are there some kind of buzzwords that you should kind of avoid either in your application or in the interview process?
Well, there are a couple ways. I mentioned one where, as a reader of applications, I get annoyed if the letter writers seem to apologize that their prize pupil has chosen to go to a college. In fact, I work at very self-respecting, they think highly of themselves types of colleges, and they don't like to be told that others think that they're the low choice on the career ladder. So be attentive, ask your writers to be attentive to these being places that pride themselves as being good job opportunities. But what about you in particular? What can you do? Well, for example, if you bury teaching on your resume on about page 12, then it will be hard to see if you're interested in a job that cares about teaching. If you bury teaching in your letter so that it's on page 3 or 4, actually letters shouldn't be that long. So here are a couple ways to keep things in mind. Remember that the job involves teaching and research, and that you want to show interest in both of those on the first page of your letter, and you want to show credentials and interest in both of those on the first page of your resume. The standard resume, and there are many different bits of advice you'll get about standard resumes and their flaws. The standard resume first lists all of your education. Then it lists all of your clubs and organizations, and then it will get into your publications, and finally it gets into other things. Think like a resume reader. Think like a letter reader. I'm interviewing for someone who will have to teach a wide range of courses, do research, involve students in that research, and be an interesting person who can work collegially on issues related to the department and the institution. I open a dossier, one of 40, one of 50, and I look at the first page. Will the first page invite me to read further? If not, I start flipping pages, and I'll skip things. You've written carefully designed prose. Break it up into paragraphs. Even offer subheads. Be sure your resume has pieces that make the first page appealing to the kinds of things the reviewer is looking for. It's your life history. You know it well, and you want to lay it out, but the reader doesn't know it well and doesn't want to know it well. They want to find it quickly and move on and compare yours to another. So I think the best advice is look at the job ads, see what they want, see if you can make yourself look interesting to those criteria early on each document. Keep the documents of modest length. Don't make them archives. Someone wants to see every single meeting you've gone to, and you have 40. Let them ask. Say the recent ones, or say the total number you've attended, and emphasize your most important talks. Be selective so that you are supportive of their need to see how you compare with others.
Excellent. Yeah, I would agree that you can lose interest in a candidate in the first page, and that opening stuff is a critical thing. How about what if you're at the interview process? Is there things that might sink your ship during that thing?
Well, here's one way to sink your ship. Make it clear that you really want to be at an institution that cares only about research, and you'd really rather teach only in your subspecialty of microelectronics. They'll say, wait a minute, we've got 12 courses and 3 faculty members, and you're going to be the 4th, and we need you to teach pretty quickly about half the courses in the curriculum. And you're already telling us you don't want to do that. So be interested in the full range of the curriculum. Be interested in what your colleagues are doing. They're going to say we're 4 or 6 physicists. Will this be someone who will be interested in more than his or her own work? So interesting questions, interesting conversations. Is there curiosity? So you sink your ship by being narrow. You sink your ship by almost complaining that you're there in the first place. Is this all the space you'll give me? Is that all the money? If you're saying to yourself, let's see, what can I do with 40,000? I was hoping for 80. The question might be, are there ways that I can leverage that smaller amount of money to be larger? But don't seem to be asking for so much more than the institution can give you that they'll say, not worth making an offer to you. There's some things that you can ask about and have constructive conversations about when you say, well, there are things I could do for 30,000 and there's more I could do for 60. How could you help me get the larger amount so I can engage more students in my research? But you don't want to start that in a way that sounds like you're whining even before you get the job offer. So save some of the tougher questions for when you have the offer in hand, and use the interview stage to be interesting and to show interest.
All right. I got a different question here from someone who has a PhD in EE, it looks like, and wondering how he can present himself as being a physicist. What he's been doing is totally 100% physics. He's had some teaching experience and even an adjunct assistant professorship. So how can he present himself as a physicist to a physics department, even though his technical degree is EE?
Well, since my own research specialty is laser physics, which might equally have come from a quantum electronics part of a EE department, I sympathize. One of the things you can do is to show that you have interest in teaching the range of physics courses. Most physicists, think about our training, we might have had a solid post-intro course in classical mechanics or electromagnetism and another one in graduate school. If you're from EE, you will have had electronics and electromagnetic theory or electromagnetic waves. You'll be prepared to teach electromagnetism at the undergraduate level. You'll be prepared, I suspect, to teach statistical mechanics. Physicists are expected to teach outside their specialties. And so if you show an interest in teaching courses across the undergraduate curriculum, introductory, intermediate, and advanced, if you show an interest in teaching laboratories, I think you'll have a very solid starting point Plus, you'll have the advantage that you'll be able to help advise students who are thinking about engineering or applied physics. So you will offer a way for a physics department to broaden itself. As long as you can be convincing that you can teach the core things in physics, I don't think the physics PhD per se will be crucial, or that the EE PhD will be a handicap. Indeed, your engineering and therefore applied science connections will be intriguing to many institutions.
Yes. All right. So here's so you mentioned earlier, Neal, about postdocs, and here's a question of: is it preferable to have a year or two of a visiting faculty experience at a PUI or a postdoc or a postdoc primarily doing research? Is there one of those better? Or maybe I can ask a related question, which is, if you take a temporary position for a year, is that a strike against you, or is that a leg up?
Well, in my career, I took a temporary position, accepted a renewal of the temporary position before I got my first tenure track offer. So I interviewed for tenure track positions. I taught only one course when I was a graduate student. I actually taught one laboratory course when I was an undergraduate as a senior. So I didn't have a lot of full teaching experience. I didn't make the cut for tenure track jobs. So I took a temporary position. I did get some research going even in that temporary position. Indeed, it turns out if you want external funding, you probably need at least a 2-year position to have the credibility to submit a proposal for research and to get it funded with some time left to do the work. But I think a few years, a year or two of temporary teaching is a good thing, as long as you don't seem then to close the door on continuing to do research. So find ways to stay active in research while you're teaching, or take a postdoc, and I would say look for opportunities within the postdoc to do some teaching, if that's possible, so that you have the mix of credentials, greater research independence from your postdoc, but also a sign that you still care about teaching, and you did teaching even when it wasn't required.
Okay. Here's somebody who's, I think, a theorist. How does a theorist sell him or herself? You can't set up labs in most colleges, and it seems like most colleges are looking for experimentalists. Do you have any advice for a theorist?
Well, the colleges still have laboratories attached to many, if not all, courses. There are probably a few colleges left that have a lab with every physics course. But there might be 5 or 6 labs, total of, 15, 18, 20 hours of laboratory teaching in addition to the course teaching. And they'll need someone who can teach the laboratories. One way a theorist can make herself or himself interesting as a job applicant is to show that you have taught some labs. Another is, of course, to be sure that you've indicated how you would teach course-lab combinations. You might be a quantum theorist, and you could say, boy, I could teach modern physics and quantum mechanics easily. What about the modern physics laboratory and the advanced junior projects laboratory? Do you show some interest in teaching laboratories? Faculty members will do most of their teaching at many colleges in the introductory physics laboratories. Have you taught introductory physics laboratories? I think the request for experimentalists, on the one hand, is because of the need to teach labs. On the other hand, the feeling is that it's easier to engage undergraduates in experimental research projects. So the other way that you can make yourself interesting as a theorist is to have checked around with colleague theorists in your field. What are projects that students could be involved in that would join with me in making research progress? How could I involve undergraduates in my theoretical work? That often seems like a contradiction, because you say it took me my undergraduate training, 4 years of graduate coursework, and graduate research and postgraduate research to be ready to do my theoretical work. How could an undergraduate help me with this? Look around. I think there are many fields where you would say, I have a lot of training. but there are undergraduates who can do parts of the research with me. Is it a computational part? Is it an analytical part? There are ways to involve smart undergraduates as research collaborators. And so if you can serve both of those needs that lead to the reflex, let's get an experimentalist, which is what a department might say. In their minds, they're saying, let's get people who can help us teach labs, and let's get people who can engage students in research. So if you can sell yourself to those core values, teaching labs and engaging students in research, you can make yourself interesting as a theorist.
Yeah, I would also point out that the Council on Undergraduate Research has a number of people who have been very successful at doing that. And so one thing you might think about is talking to a theorist at a smaller school and asking them how they set up work with their undergraduate students.
If you surf around, that's a good way to visit colleges without physically getting in a car. If you surf around and look at college websites and look at the physics departments, you will find theorists who have been very successful, are very successful at colleges, and those could be the ones to write to.
Yeah. We've still got a few more minutes left till the official end of the presentation, and again, encourage people to type in questions if they have them. Here's another one. So how important is it to really have publications? I couldn't even get one published for my PhD work.
Well, so I'm hearing two parts to that question. Ted, help me with which I should answer. One is
yes,
having publications before I apply, and the other
fair.
is to get publications while I'm working as a college faculty member.
I think it's probably the former. I think it's do you need to have publications under your belt to get in the door?
Those who have publications who show they can bring work to completion will have a leg up. A good letter from a research mentor that says what progress you're making might ameliorate that somewhat, but I think most graduate students who get the teaching positions at places that expect research will have some publications. They'll have conference presentations, they'll have some publications. I think it's hard. If you've been a full-time graduate student working on your research full-time for the last 2 or 3 years and things aren't yet published, campuses that want you to publish while you're a faculty member are going to wonder whether you've picked a field in which the progress will be sufficient to serve their needs of not just starting projects but finishing them. So maybe it's a little premature. There's a wide range of colleges, and there will be those that will be interested in you, but I would be worried if you don't have a publication yet or don't have one in the pipeline, one under review. So advance your best foot, but it will be a better foot if you have some publications than if you have none.
Okay. What about warning signs from a department? You go to a department and interview. What would be warning signs that says maybe I don't really want to take a position here?
Well, there is rhetoric and there's reality. And there's also the 35-year inertia of a career as a faculty member. So there may be a new dean, or there may be a new president, or there may be a new attitude that says we want to be this kind of place, with this kind of investment in teaching and this kind of investment in undergraduate research. You want to see how firmly that vision is represented in the faculty members who will be your colleagues. It won't be surprising if the person who's in the twilight of his or her career was hired in a different era, probably focused more on teaching, may have been interested in research, may have made some progress, may be inactive in research now. I wouldn't be discouraged if the senior faculty members don't have a research profile for the last 15, 20, 25 years. But if the other junior faculty members don't, and yet they're preaching that they want you to be the research active one, then you want to have some conversations about that contrast. How will I succeed where others haven't? What will the support be for me that others didn't get? I've seen places that turned around, and you have to pick a turnaround point and be different going forward. But if the rhetoric doesn't match the reality as evident in the resumes of the faculty colleagues, and you could look at other science departments, look at biology and chemistry as well as physics. Physics departments will be small. If it's 4 people, you could have one each 40, 30, 20, and 10 years into their careers, so it's hard to learn. You won't have good statistics from a physics department alone. But looking at the institution as a whole, look at the resource base, look at the way that money has been spent on instructional laboratories, look to see what others got in the way of support for getting started in research. And look for cues that your needs are similar to the needs of others and they've been met, rather than you being so different that you're going to be the vanguard of a new wave. And then you want lots of assurance that you will have support, because those who haven't had to do research and haven't done research will have spent more time doing other things. And if the expectation is that you be like your predecessors and do research, that was probably not a sustainable future. I'd look for interesting people. And again, physics departments are small. Look for interesting colleagues in physics. Look for interesting colleagues in related science departments. But if it looks like they're putting all of their hopes for change on you, then it's going to be a very tough job. Could be exciting, but you need to go in with your eyes wide open.
Yeah, I would also point out that as you go into an interview, you're oftentimes meeting with colleagues who are not in the department. And you should ask questions, what's it like in the department? Is there a good camaraderie? Do you feel like they get along with other departments and get along with each other? Because I think those are sometimes personality issues that you should be aware of. And again, I think Neal's suggestion of going in with your eyes open is probably a very useful thing to do. That's
a really great question, Ted, and one that I think you can ask of students as well as faculty colleagues.
Yeah.
What do you say about the physics? What do your friends say when you tell them that you're taking courses in physics? What do they say about the physics department? And to faculty members, what would you say about the department? What would you say about the physicists? How engaged are they? How is it different? How is the physics department different from other departments, or the same from other departments, same as the other departments at the college? Ask them about things that they'll know about. If you ask them what's it like to be a physics faculty member, a chemist or a philosopher probably won't know, but they will know things about the physicists and about the physics department, and that's where their insights can be most valuable.
Well, we have a couple more questions here, but I think we're running out of time. So I think we'll say a little bit about what we're going to do here. We're going to I think, end the formal presentation, but we'll be on hand to answer a few more questions. Neal has agreed to stick around, so these are very good questions. Why don't we? Looks like we're out of time, so let me have Crystal kind of do a little wrap up, and then we'll be back for a little bit more. Crystal?
Yes, thanks, Ted, and thank you, Neal, for a wonderful presentation, great questions. This has been just a really wonderful discussion. As Ted mentioned, we will be sticking around for a few more minutes after the official webinar ends, so feel free to stay and listen for the discussion, because we do have a lot of questions. And we will be passing your questions on to Neal for comment if we do not get to those today, so we'll be in touch with you about how to get those responses. Also, some of you have been asking if the presentation will be available. We will make the presentation available on the main page for today's webinar, as well as a link to the recording of this presentation. This whole thing has been recorded, so you should receive a link to that as well in a follow-up email. So in order to help us continue to develop these webinars, please do take a moment, if you do leave, to complete the short survey. And that's it. We hope you join us again next time, and feel free to stick around.
All right. Thanks, Crystal. So we'll ask a couple more questions here, and then when we probably won't stay more than about 10 minutes or 15 at the tops. But let's go to this one. Here's a question about letters. Who are the best people to write letters for you? Would it be undergraduate professors, graduate professors, research people you work with projects? Is it better to have a broad range of those questions or letters, or something more focused on your research?
I think you should have someone, certainly your research advisor, talk about your research skills and your research accomplishments. That's a key thing that folks will look for. If your PhD mentor hasn't written for you, or if you've had a postdoc and your postdoc mentor doesn't write for you, that will look very strange. But ask someone who can comment about your teaching. If you are teaching, you should ask someone to visit your classes and have some conversations about teaching physics with that person. If you have a full-time temporary position, ask a colleague or ask the department chair to look at your course evaluations, to visit your classes. Ask someone who has seen your teaching and knows a bit about student reactions to your teaching to write. If your teaching has only been in graduate school, then ask someone who has seen your contributions. It could be useful to have someone who can write about your contributions in a graduate seminar or a graduate course, but I think that may pale. So you can think about the kinds of evidence: someone who speaks about your contributions in a graduate course, someone who speaks about your research contributions, someone who speaks about your teaching. What would be interesting about an undergraduate mentor? It might be that you did research as an undergraduate. So this could be someone who speaks about you as an undergraduate student interested in research, or that you did very interesting projects in a course or in a laboratory. Folks will expect you to evolve from being an undergraduate, so think carefully. It may be that you're better friends with the faculty members who you had in college, but do they know things that are going to be related to your career as a physicist? If you were a TA as an undergraduate, that could be helpful. So don't appeal simply to friendship from your undergraduate days. Think about the evidence and how the combination of letters presents evidence relative to the credentials that you're trying to present for the job.
I would also add that you should really pick people who know you well, as opposed to, here's this famous professor at your university, and you think, I'm going to have this person write a letter for me because they're so well known, that will be a shoo-in. They probably won't be able to write a very detailed letter about what you can and cannot do, and it will come across as a little bit false, I think.
Yes, I think it's hard. Big names carry a lot of weight for that person, but not necessarily for you. Faculty members will often compare you to other graduate students. If you take someone who's taught for 50 years and they've taught 500 graduate students, it'll be hard for you to come out on top. Of course, if you do, that would be saying something. So take folks who know you, take folks who think highly of your work, and that may mean those who are a little bit more junior but are able to speak in detail about things you did. And one of the ways you can help them speak in detail is when you ask for the letter, remind them of the things you did that you hope they'll comment on. Don't just say, would you write me a letter? I say, wait a minute, who are you? Offer them your resume. Offer them some high points of their interaction with you, things you might address. And you might even say, when I'm applying to the University of Michigan, emphasize this. But when I'm applying to Denison University, would you comment on these other things, such as the seminar we did together and the sessions of the seminar that I taught, or how we talked about my teaching? So make suggestions to your letter writers. They'll love it, and it will make for a much more effective letter.
There's kind of a related question. What if you didn't get along with your advisor, and so you don't actually want to have your advisor write a letter? How would you deal with that situation? Because obviously the readers are going to notice the fact that your advisor is not one of the letter writers.
I think there will be questions why your advisor wasn't asked. If it's really terrible, then I would avoid it and look for someone else in the field. Someone has heard you talk at a conference. You want a colleague in the research field, maybe someone else on your thesis committee, who can comment on the caliber of research that you've done. I would say it's a pretty extreme situation to exclude your thesis advisor, but if you think that might be lukewarm, then get someone else in the field from the department or from outside the department who can speak to the best of the work that you have shown. In the extreme, you may want to be very well prepared to say, you know, we had a tough working relationship with my thesis advisor. Look at what I got done. I've asked some other people to write about it. But if you really want to talk to my thesis advisor, I'd like to be prepared so I could tell him that you're going to be contacting him. I don't think you want to seem to be hiding or seem to be encouraging the department to go behind your back to find out what's the real scoop. Why is my advisor not there? If at all possible, include your advisor, and then if you think that will be lukewarm, include some others who can comment on your research.
Okay. How about what if you're in, say, nuclear physics or high energy physics, where you're one of 50 people or, say, 500 people on your publications? Is it really so you're not going to, it's unlikely that you're going to be sole author. It's probably unlikely you're going to be first author unless your name begins with Asgard. So what would be, is this going to hurt you, or how do you talk about that?
Well, these are tough to read. So one of the things is to ask someone in the research team to describe what you did. Teams are big for good reason, and the question is, did you contribute specific things to the research? And have someone speak to what you did contribute, rather than just trying to ride the glory of the great discovery when you're one of 100 names. The other reason that people read publications is not just to see that you did good work, but to try to extrapolate as to what you would do next. So be sure you've been clear not only about what you did, but what you want to do next. And is that to continue to work in large groups? If so, how might you involve students in your contributions to a large group project, designing or prototyping a detector or calibrating a detector, or analyzing reams of data that big groups often generate? There are ways to show that there's an active part of that you and your students will play. So understand that there will be questions. One name out of 50. What does that mean? What did she do as part of that group? And get some folks who can comment on the specific expertise you brought and the specific contributions you made.
Might also be valuable for you to talk about how you actually have worked with undergraduates in the course of being a part of this larger collaboration, because usually large collaborations have undergraduates who work with them. So pointing that out within your letter might be a very good way to demonstrate that you know what you're doing, you know what's required to work with undergraduates, and you know what equipment might be necessary.
Yes, that's great.
Let's see. Another question is, what if you're applying to a really small department, like a 2-person department, and you're going to be the other person? There are a number of those out there. Or you're going to be at a 2-year institution where there's going to be less research involved, or a college that really is not going to be set up to do research. Are there kind of some different pieces of advice that we should have for that?
Well, study their profiles of faculty members and of their expectations. If the teaching is narrow, teaching majors and non-majors in the intro course or the pre-med course, you apply because you want to do that. And you don't want to seem, in that case, so interested in research that folks will think you won't teach. Those places probably have higher teaching loads, 3 or 4 courses per semester. You've got to be prepared to be an effective teacher with a lot of energy and enthusiasm for teaching. But you may also bring an interest in research that will engage students in research-style projects, even in introductory and intermediate courses. So you don't have to sacrifice research, but you have to show that you are interested in the job as they're offering it, with some ideas to reshape it, perhaps. But don't present yourself the same way as you would to Amherst College, where the expectation is that you teach 2 courses a semester and do lots of research involving undergraduates. If they need 4 courses, you need to present those credentials most strongly. How will your research help inform your teaching? What makes you a better teacher for having been a research scholar? Those might be things to emphasize rather than the research you want to keep doing. So tailor yourself to the expectations of the institution, pushing the envelope a little bit, but not seen to be totally inappropriate for the job.
Another question is, what if I'm from a foreign country and I have a visa issue? What would be likely to be? How should I deal with something like that? And when should I bring up this issue of needing to get an H-1B visa or to getting a green card or something like that? And can I expect the college to help me with this process?
You can expect colleges to help you with it, though it varies. Some will say, we can't afford to help you with that. We can't afford to pay the fees. There are certain fees they have to pay. If they hire you, certain fees are an obligation of the institution, and it's actually illegal for them to pass them on to the candidate, such as for the fees related to an H-1B visa. But there is no obligation of institutions to support the cost of your getting a green card, even if it's needed. So you want to work out early whether they will be supportive of that. I think those who are hiring for tenure-track positions want you. And for a tenure-track position, you'll find most colleges will help you with the costs of a green card. The best you can get from them for a temporary or a starting position where the H-1B is what you need is that they'll sponsor you promptly. So I think you shouldn't be shy. Institutions are likely to help you get the job if they've decided you're the person that they want to hire. So you first have to be interesting as the teacher, scholar, or teacher, depending on the institutional context. You have to be interesting to them as an effective and exciting candidate worth hiring. And then you talk about the details. I think there are those committees that are playing some sorts of, does this person have the visa or not? There are enough job candidates, enough international candidates who will need support for visas moving from their graduate training or practical training visas onto H-1Bs, that you're not going to stand out as being unique. You'll be maybe one of 20 to 40% of the applicants for these jobs. So I would say be direct. Are you currently on F status as a graduate student? Did you use your OPT or could you use practical training for your first year as a bridge year so they don't have to go for the H-1B immediately? Those are interesting things. Now, one other bit of advice, which you surely would get better from other websites than from me, but as dean, I learned quickly, the national job search from which the best candidate is selected leads to an eligibility to use that selection process with the Bureau of Labor requirements for applying for a green card. But those kinds of searches, a national search that leads to your selection, has an expiration date 18 months later. So you can't wait until your third year of H-1B and say, oh, now I want to apply for a green card. You may have missed your window. So the application for a green card needs to be filed within 18 months of the job offer, not the job start, but the job offer. But otherwise, if you need visa support, I would say make it clear whether you have the practical training years left to go or not, and what visa you would need to take the job. But most importantly, be interesting as a job candidate.
I think we got time for maybe one last question, which is, what if I've got I really want to go for a job that is just teaching, not a research job. So I'm going to single out institutions of which that's the primary interest. Is it important for me to have a postdoc if I go for a job like that?
No, it's most important that you show an interest in teaching and you've developed some skill in that. So a postdoc, I think, wouldn't be a negative, but absence of teaching experience would be the negative. So complement a postdoc if you have it or want it with some well-grounded teaching experience. You'll often find that community colleges in the area or other colleges may need supplemental teachers for a course, and even if you have a full-time job with some careful planning, there might be ways to teach an afternoon or evening course in addition to your full-time job if you can't find the teaching in the full-time job. But teaching-only jobs will generally have search committees looking for teaching experience and teaching credentials.
All right. Well, thanks again, Neal. This has been a very interesting discussion, and I think we'll sign off for now. Appreciate your questions from everybody in the audience, and again, to fill out the survey that you'll see at the end of that. So, Crystal, you want to take us out of here?
Yep. Thanks again, everyone, and we hope you, again, join us next time. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.